Stories of cursed or haunted media have been around since long before the digital era. Stories of mysterious development with dangerous consequences for the people who worked on it, or tales of audience members being cursed by experiencing it. In no country are urban legends more common or terrifying as Japan. Ghostly specters who wander the night, often dismembering people unfortunate enough to cross them, are common stories spread around message boards and through word of mouth. Japanese ghost stories have a particular flair to them that I always love. They're almost like riddles, with your only choices being either to trick the apparition or to run fast enough to get away. So it's no surprise that a game based on Japanese spirits would also have one of the most interesting and long-lasting urban legends of its time. In this video, we'll be discussing Kowai Shashin, a supposedly cursed game whose development disrespected the dead and led to tragedy, dismemberment, depression, and eventually suicide. Kowai Shashin, which was released on the 25th of July 2002, was a fairly basic game. You play as a spiritual exorcist who receives spirit photographs, and are tasked with removing the ghosts from the photos. It's essentially a point-and-click game where you identify the spirit, and then complete a QTE to pass them on. While the imagery of the game can be quite creepy and unnerving, the real story begins before the game was even conceived. The story goes that the director of the project, a man referred to as Keikawa, was in a meeting where he suggested making a horror game based on spirit photography. Known as Shinrei Shashin in Japan, the concept is exactly as it sounds, photographs that contain ghostly images or faces within them. While this practice has been largely discredited, there are historical examples dating back to the late 19th century. However, these were very clearly used to deceive, and often these photographers received heavy criticism for their work. Spirit photography has mostly gone out of vogue in the West, replaced with images of orbs and other paranormal anomalies, but this was not the case in Japan. Keikawa was reportedly very interested in spirit photography, and it's said that he wanted this game to be as authentic as possible. How does one accomplish this? By using real photographs from magazines and other sources. However, they couldn't just use any photo. They had to fit 3 specifications. They had to be real, they could not have been cleansed or exorcised previously, and they needed permission to use them. Keikawa refused to let anyone replace or fake the actual ghosts themselves, so instead the team had to remove things like unnecessary orbs, and in some cases increase the size of or enhance the ghosts so they were more visible to the player. Some staff claim they even moved some ghosts from one photograph to another if one didn't have enough in them. Many staff members felt that the act of tampering with these photos in any way was disrespectful and blasphemous, with some even leaving the team due to mental health issues. From here, things only got worse. When testing began on the alpha build, one staff member claims a loud high-pitched noise began coming from the walls, which got louder and louder until the member was unsure if it had completely stopped or if it just became inaudible to their ears. Another staff member was found screaming in the testing room, convulsing on the floor and grinding their teeth so hard that the person who found them could hear them chattering. When they reached the hospital, they were found to be in fine physical shape, with no explanation for the apparent seizure. Finally, in one of the more shocking incidents, a staff member cut off their own thumb, claiming that they remember doing it but have no idea why or what possessed them to do so. From here, development slowed down to a crawl, with staff dwindling every day until there were very few people left to test the game. During these events, Keikawa had apparently stopped coming into work and began taking medication and seeking a therapist. After a few weeks of no contact, Keikawa called the office claiming that he would be in later that day and was feeling better. However, he would never arrive. Instead, a meeting was called between the company president and the remaining staff, explaining that Keikawa had been found dead in the restroom of a train station, the very same train station where one of the spirit photographs had been taken. The game released very quietly to little fanfare, and Media Entertainment filed for bankruptcy a year later. If you try to search for Kowai Shashin, you will find some variation of this story. Some have more details than others, but the fact that the game used real cursed photographs and that the director was found in a train station restroom are the most consistent details. You probably figured it out as I was relaying the information, but this story is almost certainly completely fake. As far as I can tell, the first time this story appeared was in 2005, 3 years after the game's release, and was originally posted on 2chan. From here, it was spread around Japanese message boards like a game of telephone, with details being added or removed depending on the teller. Sadly, the original post almost certainly doesn't exist anymore, so there's no way to tell just how much the story has been altered over the years. The story of Kowai Shashin is a lot like a creepypasta, which basically serves the purpose of internet urban legends. When The Exorcist was released in 1973, it was an unprecedented success, becoming Warner's highest-selling movie of all time, setting box office records in theaters, and having people queuing up in freezing temperatures to see it again and again. Of course, with a movie so steeped in the supernatural and blaspheme, it would not escape rumors and speculation. This has led to what is known as the Exorcist curse, and really, it's not without foundation. Filming suffered huge delays and budget increases due to the set catching fire, and it's often cited that the only room that escaped the blaze was the bedroom where the fictional exorcisms occurred. The production was also plagued with injuries, with Ellen Burstyn and Linda Blair both sustaining back injuries, with their actual screams included in the movie. Actors Jack McGowan and Vasiliki Malioris died soon after the movie's release, and multiple actors lost family members during production. Adding to the validity of the curse are the insane stories of audience reactions to the movie, with claims of puking, fainting, and one woman even claiming to have miscarried during the movie.
I think it's disgusting.
Why?
I don't know, it doesn't, it doesn't make me want to get sick like everybody says. My legs are just going, "Nyeh," and I want to go in the lobby and not watch it, and I have to cover my ears.
What was it that made that happen?
When she started talking like devil coming out of her.
There was a mania surrounding The Exorcist, and now, almost 50 years later, it is still cited as a cursed movie. While this is a fun story and may seem odd at first, a lot of the details are either unverified or completely coincidental. Sure, 2 of the cast members died soon after filming, but that's not an uncommon occurrence. And yes, while there were many injuries on set, this was not by the devil's hand, but rather the director William Friedkin insisting that the actors be yanked aggressively on wires, slapping Father O'Malley to get a realistic reaction, and firing blanks without warning on set to shock the actors. While it's easy to debunk the curse of The Exorcist, it's still a fun story nonetheless, because of course a movie about demonic possession would be cursed. Like the Kowai Shashin story, I'm sure people heard about the audience reactions in the cinema and were convinced to see it for themselves. When I booted up the game, I already knew what to expect from reading the story and the few pictures I'd seen. It is an exceptionally simple game. You're given a photo, you figure out where the ghost is, you press X to begin exorcising it, and then you follow the QTEs. If, like me, your Japanese understanding begins and ends with hiragana and a handful of kanji, then there isn't really a lot in this game for you. Some of the story segments are voice acted by Junko Noda, however, no voice acting websites seem to include this credit. Since your mileage may vary with the story, let's talk about the meat of the game: the ghost hunting. Each level will have at least 3 ghosts, and as you get further in, they begin adding more. In the beginning, the ghosts are extremely telegraphed. They're big screaming faces or hands appearing from nowhere. While some of the pictures are creepy, I think it's pretty obvious straight away that they aren't real spirit photography. Most of them look like something Chills would cover, and when you manage to beat a ghost, they get a hilarious big red circle around them like the protagonist is making a video of their own. There are some pictures I do like. For example, the one of 3 girls standing outside the school with a single white hand resting on one of the girls' shoulders. That's kind of creepy. But then you look to the left and see an entire ghost girl and all subtlety goes out the window. Or this one, where the photo is taken at a weird angle so it looks like the street is lopsided. But once again, the giant face in the corner ruins it. Then you've got the train station photo, probably the main inspiration for the entire Keikawa story. Again, creepy, until you look closer. When it comes to the actual spirits, there are only a few variations. The fetus and ring-style girl are both pretty creepy, along with this long-armed guy who looks like a baby closer, but they get repetitive pretty fast. Speaking of repetitive, the gameplay loop pretty much never changes. In the early game, the ghosts move pretty slow and get captured in 1 or 2 hits. Then you've got the actual ritual. This is a 9-step QTE, and while that sounds daunting at first, After a level or two, you'll quickly realize something's off. First of all, every QTE is exactly the same. They're never random, they never even switch them up. They are identical. Secondly, you only need to hit 5 of them to actually pass. So in the first few chapters, it's actually significantly quicker to just do the first 5 and purposefully fail the 6th to get through it as quickly as possible. However, around chapter 4, things speed up a lot. The speed at which this game expects you to react to these enemies is insane, and there's no discernible pattern that I could tell. Once you get through those, as long as you don't choke, the rest of the QTEs never change. The annoying part, and why I only played half of this game, is that your life is this candle. It goes down when you hold X to investigate, it slowly depletes as time goes by, and when enemies attack you. This is where the last 4 steps of that 9-step QTE come in, because from what I can tell, the more you fill that up, the more health you get back at the end of the encounter, so at least they do serve a purpose. This is when the game becomes frustrating, and the flaws really begin to show. One thing that's common from the beginning is how you actually trigger the fights. You can't just mouse over the giant face and click on it. You have to find the exact point that the game wants you to click on, even if that point isn't even on the ghost anymore. The exact moment that I realized I wasn't going to beat this game was in the sideways street level. I found the first 2 faces very easily, but couldn't find the third. So when I lost, I spent 1 round just going around holding X and wasting time so I could get a hint. Eventually, I discovered through sheer brute force, the ghost I was looking for was this. This giant arc of light was meant to be a spirit. Sometimes the game uses orbs as spirits, but at least they stand out and look odd. But the worst part about this was that the location the game wanted me to click on was all the way over here. So even when I thought, oh, that looks a little odd earlier, I wasn't clicking in the right spot. All in all, I'm not surprised that when people talk about this game, they tend to ignore the actual gameplay almost entirely. There are many other examples of cursed films. The Omen, which had a similar string of deaths and odd coincidences around filming, or the Superman curse, where actors who played the spandex-clad hero were said to live tragic lives. But what about the medium we're mainly discussing? Video games. There are a ton of video game urban legends and stories. Most of the long-lasting ones like Kill Switch or Polybius are based on completely fictional events, with absolutely zero evidence that they ever actually existed. Going back to what I said earlier, the story of Koei Shashin feels a lot more like a modern-day creepypasta than just any old urban legend. See, back before creepypastas gained the reputation they have now as mediocre horror stories filled with hyper-realistic blood, they were mainly spread around for their believability. Stories like Ted the Caver, told entirely from first person and seeming like less of a constructed story, and more like one guy relaying information about something that happened to them. They were designed to be reposted, shared around, exactly like the Koei Shashin story. Arguably the most popular video game creepypasta is, of course, say it with me, Lavender Town Syndrome. The story goes that in the original release of Pokemon Red and Green in Japan, the song that played in Lavender Town contained a frequency that could only be heard by young adults and children, leading to 200 children committing suicide, and others complaining of headaches. The reason for this story's ubiquity and fame is twofold, I think. Firstly, Lavender Town is creepy. It's essentially a graveyard, and the song is intentionally unnerving and grating compared to the rest of the game's chipper soundtrack. Secondly, Pokemon has had its share of child-injuring controversies in the past, with the anime episode Electric Soldier Porygon sending almost 700 children into ambulances, and many more experiencing headaches and nausea. So, Lavender Town Syndrome combines both of these factors. There's an argument to be made that the reason I find Koei Shashin so interesting is because it took a long time to spread out of the Japanese internet. The earliest Google results that I can find in the English side of the web begin around 2019, outside of a single long play in 2016 which doesn't seem to mention the story anywhere. Obviously, when written in a foreign language, there's a level of mystique that wouldn't be there if it was written in English and posted on, say, X. But generally speaking, I think the reason people love and spread stories like this is because of the collaborative nature of it. It's almost like fanfiction. It's about taking a work that already exists and adding your own unique spin to it. In the case of The Exorcist, it adds a level of believability to fictional events. Imagine you're 15 and about to watch The Exorcist for the first time, and before he hits play, your friend turns to you and says, "Did you know this movie is cursed and tons of people died on set?" It's fun, it adds something to it that wasn't there before. The difference, and where I think Koei Shashin is extremely unique, is that with these other examples, they're building on an already successful work, whereas Koei Shashin only lasts this long because of this story. If you read Japanese reviews for this game, most of them mention the development story in some way, sometimes even just reposting the entire post. On release, the game only cost 3,300 yen, but now you'll be lucky to find it for less than 30,000 yen. Without this story, the game would have been released and completely forgotten about. Maybe remembered fondly by a few people that played it back in 2002, but like many games, it may never have found a way into the cultural consciousness. The story of the cursed development is extremely flawed. There is no proof of any of it occurring. There is no Keikawa, and depending on your belief system, photographs can't be haunted. The story of Koei Shashin is like any classic ghost story. It falls apart if you think about it too much, but it's almost so unbelievable that you can't fully buy into it. It lives in a gray area where it's almost entirely too easy to debunk, but it's much more fun to think, maybe it is true. At the end of the day, I'm sitting here talking about it. I heard about a game where supposedly real haunted photographs were used, and I sought it out, played it, and read as much as I could about it. Because while the Exorcist set probably wasn't burned by the flames of hell, nor were Japanese children mind-controlled by Lavender Town, these stories are extremely fascinating to me. And isn't that what horror is all about? Suspending your disbelief and thinking maybe, just maybe, ghosts, curses, and ghoulish apparitions could be real. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to do all that stuff that YouTubers always ask you to do, like, subscribe, all that crap. What's your favorite example of cursed media? Are there any that I missed? I'm also really interested